Guys, it's Julia, designer at the Quilty Cow, and today's tutorial is on the Tacey Tote. Before we begin, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Husqvarna Viking sewing machines and Creative Grid rulers, mats, and rotary cutters. Let's begin. The Tacey Tote is the perfect tote for any of your needs. It's got a long shoulder handle that's padded. It's got adjustable inner pockets that you can customize to any size you need. And it uses adorable charms. You can find subscription boxes and our kits and patterns on our website at thequiltycow.com or on our Facebook Lives on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Let's begin with the first step. The first thing you want to do is open up your charm and pick the perfect placemat for your tote. We're going to be making sets or strips. We're going to start by making a set of 2, and then the next strip will have 4, and the next one will have 5, and then back to 4 and back to 2. And we're going to arrange them like our pattern says. Let's start by sewing 2 charms together. Once you have your charms assembled in their sets of 2s, 4s, and 5s, we're going to take them and press them. I always press my charms to the dark side. So once you have all of your strips pressed, we're going to assemble them in a pattern. Our pattern will be a little different than just placing them together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a row of 5 in the center and place a row of 4 on each side of it. You want to make sure that one side is lined up on the right and one side is lined up on the left. And then we are going to take our sets of 2 and we're going to place them right in the center. Now you once again make sure your seams are nesting, and we're just going to throw some pins to hold that while we sew. So let's step to our machine and we'll stitch this. Once you have all of your strips pressed together, we're just going to press them away from each other. So your pattern should look like mine, with a strip of 5 in the center, 2 strips of 4, and 2 strips of 2. Once you have this done, we're going to turn it. The first thing we're going to do is to layer this onto our soft and stable. So what you want to do is center it. Our soft and stable is extra big to give lots of room for quilting and to give lots of room for squaring up. So once you have all of your charms or your panel set onto this, we're going to pin them in place so we can begin our quilting. Next, we're going to step to our machine and quilt this any way you like. Once you have your panel quilted as you'd like, we are going to trim it to size. Now to start trimming, I'm just going to take a little bit off one end and remove the points of the charms. And I'm going to do that on one of the long ends as well. Now that we have a starting point, we're going to trim it to the correct size. You want to make sure you have it lined up square on your mat. And then we're going to trim it to the proper length. Next, we'll trim the long side, making sure it's the right height. Once you have this point done, we're going to cut out our bottom corners to make our boxed corners. So these corners need to be measured at 3 inches. You want to do this for both of your main panels. Once you're done with your main panel, we're going to repeat those corners for our lining as well. I always stack my lining the same way I'm going to assemble it. So I put it right sides together, make sure everything's nice and square, and we're just going to cut out those box corners. Once we have our box corners cut out, we are going to set our main and our lining aside. Once you have your main and lining set aside, we're going to make our handles. So you need to gather your 4-inch strips. Once you have your 4-inch strips, we're going to press them in half. Once you have your center line pressed, we're going to open it back up. And we're going to fold our raw edges right to the middle, to that crease that we just made. And then we're going to fold it in half again and press. I'm going to use clips to hold this together while I work my way down the strip. Once you have your handle pressed and pinned or clipped together, we're going to step to our machine. We're going to sew an 1/8 inch along both sides, and we're also going to sew down the center. This handle is just a little poofier than normal, but it's perfect to keep all that weight off your shoulders. Once you have your handle complete, you want to repeat that for the second handle. So your handle should look like this. We are going to attach these next to our main fabrics. So you'll need to gather those. You want to mark the center. To find the center of my panel, I just want to fold it in half and pinch right in the middle. I'm going to use a friction pin just to mark a little line right at the top edge. And I'm going to repeat that for both my panels. Once you have your center marked, we're going to measure over. Our handles today are going to be placed 3.5 inches from our center mark. So I'm just going to draw marks right on the top lines. Right there against the top of the panel. Repeat that for both your panel pieces. Once you have your marks made, we're going to place our handles just to the outside of this mark. I'm going to use clips to hold these in place. You want to make sure to double check that your handle isn't twisted anywhere along the way, and you're going to repeat that for your second panel. Once you have your handles clipped, we are going to baste them in place. Once we have our handles base stitched onto both of our main panels, we're going to set our mains aside and we're going to work on our pockets next. Our lining pockets are going to have the interfacing just on 1/2 of the pocket. So what we want to do is to fold it in half and give it a press and apply that. And then we're going to turn them. Once we have our interfacing applied, we're going to turn it so the right sides are together. And we are going to sew the edges of our pocket. We're going to sew this long raw edge. Once we have our raw edges sewn, we're going to turn our pocket right side out. And we're going to get our pressing mat. Make sure that you have the seam right at the bottom edge, and we're just going to press this to get all those wrinkles out and get a nice crisp fold. You're going to repeat the step for both of your lining pockets. Once you have them nice and pressed, we are going to step to our machine and add a top stitch right along this top folded edge. Once you've completed your top stitching on both of your pockets, we're going to attach them to our lining fabrics. So the first thing we need to do to attach these is to mark the placement where they're going to be. So in our pattern, it tells us that we want to measure up 3.5 inches right from this bottom edge. And I'm just going to put a little mark right there. It doesn't have to be all the way across. Just so I can make sure there's one on each side and I can get my pocket in the right location. I'm going to repeat this for my other lining. Once we have our guide marks in place, we are just going to take our pocket, make sure that you take the top stitch edge and place it towards the top flat edge of your lining. And we're just going to line it up right on top of those marks we made. I'm going to place some clips to hold them in place. You want to repeat this step for your other lining and pocket piece as well. Once we have our pockets in the right location, we're going to step to our machine. We're going to baste down one side, across the bottom, and up the other side. We're going to sew that so that we can secure our pocket, and then we'll pick where we want to divide our pockets at. Once we have our pockets basted in place, we next need to decide how big our pockets need to be and how many we want. You can mark those out with a friction pin and a ruler. So I'm just going to pick a few lines and draw from the top all the way to the bottom. So I've drawn 3 lines. This side's going to have 4 pockets. Let's make the other one have bigger pockets because you never know what you're going to carry. So we're just going to place one right in the center. Next, we're going to step to our machine and we're going to stitch right on top of these lines we just drew. I'm going to start stitching at the top, make sure to back stitch, and I'm going to stitch all the way to the bottom where I'm going to back stitch again to lock our seams in place. Once you have your seams sewn in, you want to use an iron to remove your marks. So I'm just going to press right on this seam and erase the marks that we just made. Once you have your lines erased, the next step we're going to do is to actually start assembling our tote. So you want to turn your lining so it's right sides together, lining up your top, bottom, and sides. You want to make sure that your corners down here are the same, and then clip or pin them to hold them in place while you sew. When we sew our lining, we are going to make sure that we have a turn opening left, right, in the center on the bottom. So that way when we assemble, we can turn our bag the right direction. We are going to start sewing the sides and then we'll sew across this bottom seam. Once we have sewn our sides and our bottom, the next thing we're going to do is to box our corners. To box corners, you just need to turn your fabrics so that you can open up and pinch this corner together. You want to line up the seams from the side of your bag to the bottom of your bag. And I'm just going to add some clips to hold this in place. And we're going to repeat that on the other corner. Once you have your corners ready to be sewn, we're going to step to our machine and sew these closed. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and end to lock in your edges. Once you have your lining completely finished, we are going to do the exact same thing with our main fabrics. So you want to make sure your mains are right sides together. The handles do make this a little poofier, so I always use a couple extra clips to hold it together. When you are ready to pin your bottom, what you'll need to do is to tuck your handles up inside so they don't get caught down in this seam. Once you have all your clips in place, we're going to step to our machine, and once again we'll sew the sides. This time we're going to sew completely across the bottom. Once you have your sides and your bottom sewn together, we're going to repeat the same steps we did on the lining to box our corners of our mains. Once we have our corners boxed on our main, we're going to turn it so that our fabric is right side out. Once you have your bag turned right side out, the next step is to place it inside of your lining. So you want to make sure that your main and your lining are right sides together. And then we're just going to take our handles and tuck them down right on the inside. The next step you'll want to do is to go around and pin or clip all the way, starting at the side seams to make sure those get lined up properly, and just work your way around the bag. The handles with this are a little more difficult, so you'll want to make sure on the inside that you just kind of pull them apart so they don't get sewn in crooked when we assemble our bags. Once you have the top of the bag all pinned or clipped together, what we're going to do is take the accessory tray off of our machine. Just makes it much better to work with to do bags. The next thing we're going to do is to sew around this entire top edge to hold these together. Once you have the top of your bag sewn and assembled together, we're going to take and turn it right side out through this hole down here in the lining. So you'll just want to take your time and work your fabric through this hole. Be careful not to stretch or pull. We don't want to warp the fabric there. So once we have our bag right side out, we are just going to take our lining and sew this opening closed. So what you'll want to do is to tuck it under and pin or clip it all the way down this line to hold it together. You can press it so it's nice and smooth. Once we have this all pinned together, we're going to step to our machine and sew this. Once you have your turn opening sewn shut, we are just going to press it into our lining. Press our lining nice and flat inside of our bag. You want to make sure the box corners are all nice and even. Then we need to go and press this top edge so we can top stitch it. So you just want to work your way around the top edge, making sure this top seam is nice and flat all the way around. Once you have this top edge nice and smooth, we're going to step to our machine and top stitch just a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, or 1/8 inch right along this top edge, however you prefer to top stitch. And that is how you make the Tacey Tote. You can find this kit on our website at thequiltedcow.com or on our Facebook Lives on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Please like and subscribe for more tutorials, and thanks for watching.
Okay, you wicked cool quilters, good job. You made it to the end. We would like to thank our sponsors, Husqvarna Viking Sewing Machines, Creative Grids, Rulers, Rotary Cutters, and Mats. Thanks for watching.